In 1880 through 1914, after fleeing from anti-Semitism in Russia, the Jews had been yearning to establish their own homeland on ancestral grounds. During the early Zionist movement, Jews had immigrated to Palestine with hopes of avoiding future religious persecution. To add on, an average of 2,000 to 3,000 Jews have immigrated to Palestine. In fact, this was the largest influx in over 400 years. Additionally, during this time, there was also a towering amount of impediment to a peace agreement between Israel and Palestinians, due to all the prospering amount of immigrants flooding into the Israeli land. In the midst of conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the Israelis have approached the issue with an attitude to keep the land and use it for religious purposes and to make sure that the Palestinians didn't have any interference with the Israeli settlements. But the Zionists had settled with the national aspiration and had slowly, warily accepted the UN partition plan. As a result of this happening, Jewish and Palestinian states were separated due to the division of the British Mandate. Some challenges that Israelis face to this day, as a result from the conflict about Israeli settlements, is that the Palestinians and the Israelis still have tension when it comes to giving more land to either side to become their own state. Also, the Israelis did happen to be served some injustice and opposition, such as religious persecution, but the Palestinians were also left feeling opposed because some of the Israeli land fell onto parts of Palestinian territory.
Israeli settlement has become a big issue in West Bank and Gaza ever since 1967. This process can be defined as the illegal Israeli construction and occupation of communities in the West Bank. Some of the settlers have moved to the West Bank for religious purposes. Some moved because they want to claim the West Bank territory as Israeli land, and others for the purpose of housing. Additionally, housing tends to be cheap because new construction is often subsidized by the Israeli government. Settlements are generally considered to be a major impediment to peace. However, Jews have been making an attempt to annex the whole settlement and evaluate the Palestinian settlement. Palestinians are trying to occupy their land and make a Palestinian state. Both of them disobeyed the United Nations Tuesday, so the United Nations is trying to have a solution. The tension turned into Six-Day War, which happened between June 5th and June 10, 1967. During those days, Israel took a decisive win which gave it a chance to take all of the West Bank and Gaza. In order to keep peace and justice, United Nations was immediately make a solution. According to United Nations Resolution 242, which to live in peace, within secure and recognized borders free from the threat or act of force, which Arab states accept it eventually because this forbids Israel to take action on the West Bank and Gaza. In order to solve this completely, lots of people are trying to find a solution. One of them was Antonio Guterres said, "For the Secretary General, there is no plan B for the two-state solution. In this respect, any unilateral decision can be an obstacle to the two-state goal. It is of great concern for the Secretary General. There is a need for the two parties to engage a bona fide negotiation to reach the goal of two-state, Israeli and Palestinian, two-state for two people. For me, two-state is the best solution since they have been fought about the land for nearly 60 years. Divide Israel and Palestine is the only solution, since Israel is already a developed country and the occupation was done by them. Let Palestine get most of the West Bank and Gaza to be the Palestinian state and the rest of the land be Israel state. That seems to be the fearless way."
Palestinian ancestors lived in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. Jerusalem had the third most important site, which is called Dome of the Rock. This dome was completed in 691 CE and was located on the Temple Mount in the Old City of Jerusalem. Palestinians were under the control of Arab countries and Israel. The Palestinians' war in 1948 was known as the War of Independence or the War of Liberation. This war transformed into an interstate conflict between Israel and Arabs. The result of the war was that Israel controlled 60% of the Arab state proposed by the 1948 partition plan. This war was for the Palestinians to reclaim their land that they lost. In the 1880s, the Palestinian Jews, known as the Yishuv, were 3% of the population. They didn't aspire to build a modern Jewish state. In the 19th century, a political ideology grew out of Europe. This claimed that Jews were a race who deserved a modern Jewish state. A movement began to buy land and to build more settlements just to strengthen their claim to the land. These settlements were built largely on the coastal plain of kibbutzim and moshavim. In 1948, Zionists declared the newly independent state of Israel. In 1967, they fought a war and took over more Palestinian territory, and ever since 1967, Israelites have been building new towns and cities in the Palestinian territory of the West Bank. The Palestinians viewed this as illegal occupation of their own land. The Committee in Judea and Samaria are legalizing issues of land ownership for Jewish settlements that have finished its work. This is intended to legalize several homes built without permits throughout the West Bank. The first recommendation is a shift in policy and on how boundaries of settlements communities are treated. The second recommendation is a concern in which settlements are built on state-owned land. The purpose of this is to allow construction of roads or other isolated settlements is not state-owned.